Is there any truth to the notion that Charlie Kirk's change of beliefs about Israel is what got him killed? This is one of the biggest rumors going around right now. And today we're going to explore One Nation Under Blackmail, a book by Whitney Webb. We're going through this book series. We're in section 5, and we're going to go through a chapter that started to lay down the principles, the ideas, if you will, about the idea of what is America's relationship to Israel and the establishment of Israel as a nation. And did Charlie Kirk's religious beliefs and the evangelical Christian beliefs of Charlie Kirk previously and his change of heart in recent years lead to the assassination of Charlie Kirk? These are big questions that are being asked by a lot of people. And as we go through this chapter, we're going to dive in to some of those questions. After all, as they say, the devil is in the details. Now, I want to say before we get started, this is an extremely difficult chapter for those with super strong religious beliefs. And unfortunately, I have to say this caveat. If your religious beliefs are stir you up to so much feelings inside that it makes you angry and violent, one, you should probably reconsider the foundations of your faith if it makes you a violent person. But that's the truth of the matter, is that when people talk about religion, some tend to get violent, which I find a little ironic. This particular chapter of the book that we're reviewing, One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, is going to start dealing with some of the foundational principles of a movement called Zionism, or the idea that America, for example, helped with the creation of Israel as a state, in part because of religious beliefs, and whether or not the evangelical Christians in America, why they largely support the establishment of Israel and pro-Israel stance, whether that has to do with religious beliefs. And so there's one part that is very political. And again, you can't talk about Charlie Kirk's death without getting into politics and religion. I'm sorry, there's just no way to do it. And I will try to accomplish discussing this with as much kid gloves as I can, but I have to explore some of the questions that are being asked about Erika, his wife, Charlie Kirk's wife, as it relates to possibly his changing of positions on Israel. There's no way around at least addressing that. And as we get into today's chapter on One Nation Under Blackmail, while it's not dealing with Charlie Kirk, and while that book was written and published before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, many believe that it is partly due to Charlie's changes of beliefs about Israel in particular that ended up getting him killed. This book and this chapter that we're about to dive into deeply is going to get into some of the history between America and the establishment of Israel as a nation, which would lead into modern times. And at the end, we're going to cover the book first, but at the end of this particular episode, which is going to be, again, very difficult, so please hold your hats and be gentle. If you have super strong opinions about religious beliefs, probably best to set this one aside and just wait for later chapters where the previous chapters, no real huge talk about religion. Later chapters, hopefully not big talk about religion. This chapter is going to delve into a little bit of religious questions because there's just no way around it as we get into the establishment of Zionism and establishment of Israel, and whether there's religious beliefs that went with it, and whether or not the rumors going around have anything to go with it. Again, they're just questions. If you can't handle questions and you think you're going to lose your mind, best to just turn this off. All right. So again, we're not going to get into the religious aspect of it real early. So you can hold tight for a while and just relax. This is the book we're covering, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1, Whitney Webb. This is a great book that we're getting into. I'm going to try to dive to page, I think 104. I'll just see if I can go to can I go to the page? No, shit. How do I go to a page? You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to jump this way and we're going to back up because we were finishing chapter 2 and we're going to go into chapter 3. So I'm just going to go right here to the blue section. We're going to finish chapter 2, moving into chapter 3, and it's going to start really informing us. Again, not super religious here, but when you start getting into Israel and the United States and gangsters and mobs and all that shit, it will come forward and ask really difficult questions. Last warning. If you can't handle that kind of discussion, tune out. I have a lot of experience in this area, and so I will try to do my best to handle it with kid gloves. All right. from this section of chapter 2, business as usual. Other aspects of Hoover's. Now we were talking about J. Edgar Hoover being influenced and blackmailed by the mob. That people in organized crime had basically gotten blackmail on J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, because he was into cross-dressing and homosexuality at a time when that wasn't super popular. That's all in the previous chapter. If you missed that, that's a doozy. That's a doozy. We're continuing on here now with the story of Hoover being blackmailed and the people who lead up into the government and the connections between Israel, mob, US, all that kind of stuff like that. And again, when you do this, there's a lot of names. There's a lot of names that are coming out here. And I don't expect you or me or anybody to remember all the names. It gets super convoluted. The more you know about history, the better it's going and easier this is going to be. But don't get baffled by the names. We're just doing some high level thinking, right? High level thinking. So don't worry too much if you can't follow along. Other aspects of Hoover's symbiotic relationship with these organized crime tinged networks can also be seen in Hoover's ties to Rosenstiel and Rosenstiel's close associate Roy Cohn. So in the previous chapters, we heard a lot about, and I told you before, when you get up to Jeffrey Epstein, when you get to Jeffrey Epstein's suicide, which I believe Charlie Kirk was pushing for the releasing of Jeffrey Epstein's files. So again, we're starting to see what I see. I see as connection points between those things. When you start moving up to Epstein, you have to talk about the Leslie Wexner and Bronfman families, which were tied to Epstein. And so this book starts way back, and it leads us into the Bronfman family, and that's what we're dealing with here. And we're also talking about the Bronfmans and again Rosenstiel and Hoover and Roy Cohn. So again, if you don't have the background information and you don't have to memorize all these names, just do your best to follow along. It's the high level stuff I'm going to try to bring your attention to. Most records place the beginning of Hoover's relationship with Rosenstiel as occurring in the 1950s, the same decade that Hoover was allegedly attending Rosenstiel's blackmail parties. Again, they were talking about the blue suites, that this is how they got blackmail on J. Edgar Hoover, FBI director, was that he had a penchant for cross-dressing and homosexuality, and he got into some parties with some people that then used his penchant for things that wouldn't be all that good for the public eye to know that he was cheating on his wife or whatever, or having homosexual relationships, and then blackmailed about, hey, if you would be ashamed if this came forward. That blackmailing of Hoover is a major part of this book. It's something that has been rumored to be around for a long, long time. All right. So Rosenstiel's FBI file obtained by Anthony Summers cites the first Rosenstiel meeting as taking place in 1956. So that's one person's official meeting. Hey, the first time that Rosenstiel's FBI file met with Hoover is 1956. After requesting that meeting, Rosenstiel was granted a personal face-to-face meeting with the director in a matter of hours, a rare feat. What this is leading up to, again, I want you to point to the high level stuff. What it's leading up to is, while some will say the first meeting between these two individuals is 1956, it seems they already knew each other. And that's what they're getting to. Rumors and speculation is these men already knew each other, had a long past from way back in the blue rooms and the sex parties and stuff like that. And that explains why very, very quickly these two men are tight as thieves, because again, they already knew each other. This was not their first meeting. That's the gist of this chapter. This is not their first meeting, even though a historian might say the first time they met was here. However, they're going to lay down the argument why that's not true, why you can see that they already knew each other. Stay with us. So after requesting the meeting, Rosenstiel was granted a personal face-to-face meeting with the director of the FBI in a matter of hours, a rare feat. However, Summers notes, this author notes, that there is evidence that the two men had met much earlier, as Hoover was on record showing an unusual concern in the FBI's handling of Rosenstiel's criminal links as early as 1939. So Hoover already was aware of Rosenstiel and was trying to look into, well, hey, maybe getting unusually interested in what's going on with Rosenstiel, allegedly maybe his buddy who had blackmailer information on him. So while historians say, oh, they met in 1956, he was already interested in Rosenstiel's criminal links as early as 1939, again indicating that maybe they already knew each other, and again had blackmail, or he already had blackmail on him. The Blue Suite parties and blackmail may also explain the uncharacteristic ease with which a young Roy Cohn was able to meet with J. Edgar Hoover upon his arrival as a young man in Washington, D.C. in 1952. Roy Cohn's account of how he was able to meet Hoover in person deemed improbable by Cohn biographer Nicholas von Hoffman, and it goes on to say, so Nicholas von Hoffman says, hey, Roy Cohn, who is just a young guy, has this crazy story about how quickly J. Edgar Hoover took him under his wing and knew him. And that just seems implausible. J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't have done that unless you believe the rumors that they were involved sexually in the blue rooms prior to their meeting officially. And I realize there's a lot. I get it. There's a lot. Trust me. I understand. Just focus on the high level stuff. I say that a million times. Cohn, only in his mid-20s, had been seeking Hoover's aid and gathering support for a controversial presentment, which alleged communist subversion among United Nations staff. Okay, so he wants to see Hoover about communism because Red Scare, that was a big thing, the Red Scare about communism. Everybody's a communist in this country. We had a big period in this country where everybody was a communist. This young man in his 20s at this point, but you'll find maybe they knew each other when he was a little younger than 20, and that might be important in the blue rooms. But anyways, Hoover, who is supposed to be talking to Cohn for the first time, per official accounts, is alleged to have said, "Roy, are you trying to see me?" To that, Cohn claimed to have responded, "You're darn right I'm trying to see you. It's been rather difficult." Hoover then offered, "Whenever you want to see me, you just pick up the phone and ask for me, and you'll be able to see me." "Well, when can I see you?" Cohn had asked, with the director then saying, "Come on over." Per Cohn, he was then seated in front of Hoover within 10 minutes. So this conversation, where Whitney Webb gets it and all this like that, it's an alleged conversation on the record somewhere that's literally how fast Roy Cohn was able to meet with the FBI director. "Hey, I want to see you, and it's really difficult. Just pick up the phone and tell him you want to see me. I'll come here 10 minutes, so you'll be in." How can that happen if that's the first time they'd met? How do they have that tight of a relationship? Well, unlikely, per von Hoffman, this historian, was Hoover's alleged urging to Roy that when you want to see me, call me directly. Don't go through channels. The Justice Department is monitoring your calls at your own office across the way. Von Hoffman states that this degree of frankness with a junior with whom he'd only recently met is at odds with Hoover's reputation as one of the most apt of mountain goats in negotiating the trails and passes of the federal bureaucracy. So this historian finds it odd that Hoover would do that. So he doubts the story. How can he get an audience with Hoover so quickly? Well, because allegedly they have a history. Von Hoffman concludes that Cohn's story was inaccurate, though he's like, that doesn't seem realistic that this young man can get in to see Hoover so quickly. Though he notes that Roy's account of what Hoover told him is a story that somebody with a dangerous secret to hide might tell. However, in the context of the Blue Suite parties at the Plaza Hotel, it's certainly possible that both Cohn's account of his first official meeting with Hoover and his harboring of a dangerous secret are both true. In other words, Cohn may have had a dangerous secret about Hoover, and that's why when the young man calls and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you," he's like, "Come on over. You got shit on me. You got blackmail. I don't want our previous relationship known. I'll get you in a second. You want to see me? Come on over." That's the allegations. And yeah, it falls into rumor and speculation. This historian, this Whitney Webb is documenting it. There's not a lot of citations for it, so take it with a grain of salt. This is a person saying that, "Hey, I see this connection. If you don't see it, that's fine." All right. This is supported from press reports of the same period that claim that as soon as Cohn caught Hoover's eye in Washington, D.C., Hoover showered Cohn with compliments and notes and photographs. That's actually, again, that according to Whitney Webb, with a footnote, with a citation at the end of the chapter, says that this is a period that press reports of the period claim soon after Cohn caught Hoover's eye in Washington, Hoover showered him with compliments, notes, and photographs. Author Barton Hirsch similarly asserts that soon after the meeting, Hoover and Cohn traded favors, effusive compliments, gifts, and elaborate private dinners. It quickly became Roy and Edgar. These two, this young man and Hoover, tight as thieves from the day that they met. Does it go back to something that happened in the blue rooms? That's the allegations from non-historians or a historian of alternate perspective, whatever you want to say it. Anyways, in an era where Red Scare, that's the communist thing, in an era where Red Scare raged alongside the so-called Lavender Scare, which targeted homosexuals with the same fervor as Red Scare targeted communists, the bonds forged between a group of men who shared their forbidden passions in a milieu of secretive orgies, blackmail, and organized crime would have fostered a much stronger sense of camaraderie. What that's saying is, in that time, in the same time that we were obsessed with communists, we also had an obsession about homosexuals and a negative connotation. And so it would have been bad for the FBI director to admit that he goes to parties where homosexual activities take place, including maybe perhaps with rumor, Roy Cohn and Rosenstiel at the Blue Rooms. And so, therefore, this would have created a strong bond because they would have had blackmail material on Hoover. That's all rumor and speculation, but file it away in the memory banks. Could that happen in America? Did it happen? Did the FBI director get compromised? And for freaking a long, long time, was he under the thumb of fear from blackmail? Soon after meeting Hoover officially, I love how they put it in quotes, officially the first time they met, in 1956, Hoover sent Rosenstiel flowers when he later fell ill. A year later, Rosenstiel was heard telling Hoover, "Your wish is my command," during a meeting. That same year, Louis B. Nichols, Hoover's number two at the Bureau for decades, was hired to become executive vice president of Rosenstiel's empire, Schenley. So again, Hoover's next in line on the FBI is directly tied to Rosenstiel and Cohn and the alleged trio of men from the Blue Rooms that we talked about in the previous chapter. Boy, it's going to be hard to get this done in the amount of time that I want to get it done, don't I? All right, so let's I just scrolled down. Okay, a few years later in 1956, Nichols incorporated the J. Edgar Hoover Foundation. Rosenstiel was the principal contributor, giving the foundation 1,000 shares of Schenley stock. Nichols also gave a smaller yet unknown amount of Schenley shares to the foundation, while the American Jewish League Against Communism, of which Roy Cohn was now president, gave $500 to help start the foundation. A year later, the Dorothy H. and Louis Rosenstiel Foundation gave $50,000 to the foundation. In 1968, the Rosenstiel Foundation gave an additional $1 million to the foundation that was made in the form of bonds of the Glenn Alden Corporation, which took over Schenley's industry at that same year. Don't get baffled in all the names. You do not have to memorize all that shit. You're just looking for high level, just look at the high level thing. A 1969 report in the Washington Post later noted that nearly everyone directly associated with Nichols in the Hoover Foundation is or was connected either with the FBI or the Schenleys. The report also noted that despite lofty promises regarding the foundation's activities, it spent hardly any money at the time the Washington Post report was published in 1969, suggesting that something about the foundation's activities during that period was odd. Were they laundering money through that individual? Again, can anything get improved? The author is just laying foundational thing. These people who knew each other from the Blue Rooms and had a sexual relationship and were blackmailed and compromised. They do things together in business, which later become a little bit legitimized, but it starts very, very quasi sketchy, and you don't have to memorize all the details. Around the same time, Rosenstiel began to retire, selling his controlling interest to Glenn Alden in 1968 and resigning as chairman and CEO of Schenley. While it seemed that Cohn would serve as Rosenstiel's successor in matters of blackmail, it seems another man served as his successor in matters of business. Per Rosenstiel's New York Times obituary, around the time that he sold his control of Schenley to Glenn Alden and retired, he has also sold his Manhattan townhouse, bugged for blackmail, to Israeli-American businessman Meshulam Riklis. Now, again, let's tie this real quickly into Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, it is believed by many, had a house, a mansion, and other places that were rigged up for blackmail. They were rigged up with cameras to spy on people. And this is a tactic that the Israelis used. And this is a house that was bugged for blackmail and then owned by an Israeli-American businessman for the purpose rigged for blackmail, for the purpose of bringing in political figures, providing them with sexual favors, which are caught then on camera and then used to blackmail political figures. That's the high level thing you need to pay attention to. That history of using houses bugged with cameras and recording information to bring in high level people in governments, for example, or in areas of industry, and then provide them with sexual favors, blackmail them, and then you have got control of them and the entire country. Now, we're going to wrap up here in a little bit. It's going to take us a while. We're on good pace, and then we're going to get into that religious stuff. I told you, oh my gosh, I'm already nervous talking about it. And yet I have to, because I feel like if you don't like what I have to say, please don't unsubscribe from the entire channel because one chapter out of, by the way, I have 600 and something videos. If you have one hiccup because of what I'm saying today out of 629 videos, I guess it is what it is. All right. Organized crime and the state of Israel. Ooh, shit. Oh, I don't even like talking about this. It's just brutal. A lot of Americans can't handle even talking about this. We're going to do it anyways. We're going to do our best. Organized crime and the state of Israel. In its July 1971 obituary for Samuel Bronfman, and again, I told you Bronfmans and Epstein were coming into modern times. Bronfman and Epstein is a thing. Leslie Wexner and Epstein is a thing. So just keep in track of those names. The Wexner and Bronfman family with Epstein is getting real close to modern times here shortly. In its July 1971 obituary for Samuel Bronfman, the New York Times wrote that after World War II, the liquor baron had helped finance a secret purchase of Canadian weapons for troops of the Haganah. Now, we're going to learn more about the Haganah. This is basically supplying arms for Israel to win its independence before Israel becomes a nation. So we're going to go back in time to talk about the history of this. Peter Newman, I know it's confusing, by the way. Peter Newman, in his otherwise extensive The Bronfman Dynasty, writes that Sam personally underwrote life insurance policies for Canadian pilots recruited to help Israel fight its 1948 War of Independence. 1948 is when the nation of Israel, suddenly and miraculously armed to the teeth, decided that it was going to declare its independence and fight, and they were armed to the teeth because of illegal arms smuggling, allegedly, and people in America, for example, that were providing arms for Israel, getting ready for Israel to be able to defend itself and fight for its independence and become a state again, the state of Israel, which hadn't existed prior to this time. Now, where we're going with this and why I'm saying that I'm treating this as kid gloves is there is a belief that in America, in particular, evangelical Christians are extremely sympathetic to the establishment of Israel as a nation because a lot of evangelical Christians believe in dispensationalism, something that Charlie Kirk, I'm getting way ahead of us. So I was going to save this for the end, but I feel like we have to kind of preface some of this so you know where it's going. There's a belief that Charlie Kirk was an evangelical Christian, a very, very vocal evangelical Christian, Protestant Christian, and that he believed, and I remember seeing him on a video saying that dispensationalism is near and dear to my heart. Dispensationalism, not to give you a theological lesson, is basically an idea, to try to summarize in a nutshell, an idea that biblical prophecy requires Israel to be a major player in the end times before the return of Jesus Christ. That's the idea of dispensationalism, that there's that prophecy predicts Israel will rise again as a nation. At the time that this is happening, before 1948, Israel wasn't established as a nation. They'd been spread, they wiped out as a nation. And so there are some elements, or a large element in the United States government, from evangelical Christians who believe that America's role is to help establish Israel again as a nation to fulfill biblical prophecy, because the book of Revelations and other places, they believe, talks about the tribulation time, which talks about Israel being a nation. And how can that happen if Israel isn't a nation? So therefore, according to the belief system, is those who believe in that religious prophecy needs to be fulfilled will help it along, right? So if Israel is going to be in the end times a nation, then and it's not, then we need to help create Israel as a nation to make those end times happen and thus fulfill prophecy. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm not trying to knock religion. Please don't take out of this that I'm trying to insult religion. I was huge into religion for a long time. I know a crap ton about the Bible. And so I'm not trying to insult people, and I'm trying to do my best. But again, if you can't handle these kind of topics, check out. All right, now here we go. So he was helping Israel. Well, he was helping underwrite insurance policies for Canadian pilots who were recruited to fight with Israel to fight in its 1948 War of Independence. However, it is also known that a few years after Israel's creation in 1951, so it was established, Israel established itself as a nation again in 1948, and so a few years after Israel's creation in 1951, Bronfman would play a leading role in a similar secret purchase for the Haganah's successor, the Israeli Defense Force. So again, U.S. businessmen, Israeli U.S. businessmen supplying arms to Haganah to help Israel rise up, declare its independence, and continue to fund it and provide it weapons after their independence, because they still have to fight wars to keep their independence. In that case, Bronfman specifically answered the call of Israel's Shimon Peres, taking Peres to Ottawa, Canada, to negotiate the transfer for $2 million worth of weapons to Israel. Bronfman then raised funds to cover the entire cost of this sizable arms cache. Now, of course, again, fine line when you're selling arms to another country, you're helping them out and you're also making money off the sales of those arms. So now we have this whole relationship between American Israeli businessmen and the funding of Israel and providing them weapons to fight and defend themselves and their ongoing bid for establishment of a nation because, again, in large part, the rumor has it and the allegation has it, leading to Charlie Kirk eventually, is that a certain group of Protestants, religious Protestants, believe that Israel has to be existing in the last days because that's to fulfill biblical prophecy. And so it's easy to get people who are religious in the government to say, we need to have a lot of policies to back Israel, support Israel, because this is all required to fulfill end times for their religious beliefs. Now, is that happening? Or is it all just money? Because one can argue, just follow the money. And one can even argue, and I know this is confusing, one can even argue it's easy to use religion to fulfill your purposes of money. So if I want to sell arms and I want to make money, if I convince you that there's, hey, it's God's will that we do this, then that whatever I need to tell you to get you to help me out and make money off the sale of those arms, good for me. There's the sarcastic way of saying it. Now, what was at stake was the creation of Israel itself. So this is the establishment of Israel. What was at stake was the creation of Israel itself as a sovereign political entity independent of the British, who until 1948 had controlled mandatory Palestine in accordance with treaties set up at the end of World War I. When the British mandate ended in 1958, Israel declared itself independent and immediately entered into conflict with the Palestinians and a coalition of Arab forces. Those fighting to create Israel were able to assert themselves to forcefully, largely because of the careful groundwork that had been laid out in advance by a number of individuals and groups, many of them working in the shadows. This is talking about how American Israeli interests were supplying Israel with arms, getting them ready for their fight of independence prior to the formation of Israel. The formation of the Haganah in 1920 was a major step forward, stepping back again now to the time of the establishment of this this movement to establish Israel's independence. The formation of the Haganah in 1920 was a major step forward towards the formation of the Israeli state. Vital to its functioning was the training and arms provided by the British military. Major General Lord Charles Wingate, who had been dispatched to help administer British control over the territories, worked closely with the Haganah. Wingate even organized joint British Army Zionist parliamentary commando units dedicated to patrolling and suppressing Arab elements in the region. Those were called the Special Night Squads. That sounds horrible. Anyways, in 1945, the Haganah began its effort to stockpile weapons, ammunition, aircraft, non-lethal supplies, machine tools sourced from around the globe. So this is the right before their fight for independence, they're getting funded with arms, again, illegally in many ways, from Israeli-American interest as well. In the U.S., Ben Gurion reached out to a close associate, Zionist activist Rudolf Sonneborn, who had traveled to Palestine years earlier to survey the construction of Jewish villages on behalf of the World Zionist Organization. Under the leadership of Sonneborn, 18 or so Jewish millionaires and billionaires were recruited into and bankrolled the supply effort. Thus, the Sonneborn Institute, as it was known, was born. The Institute, an activist collaboration of Zionist millionaires and billionaires that pursued specific Zionism-related causes, would later serve as sort of a model for the mega group founded years later by Leslie Wexner and Charles Bronfman. Again, Wexner, Bronfman, Charles and Jeffrey Epstein getting very close in 1991. This is where I told you to watch those names as they come up to Jeffrey Epstein. So Zionist-related causes means, again, a lot of religious people who believe that Israel must be established again in end times to fulfill biblical prophecies, that had millionaires and billionaires that were helping support the establishment of Israel as a nation, in part with sympathy from Christians to say, look, Israel has to be a thing to fulfill biblical prophecy. So they found a mutual love of Israel to supply Israel and support Israel. And so behind it all, one has argued that a lot of the reason why the United States is thick as thieves with Israel is because there's a lot of Christians who believe that it is the biblical requirement for Israel to exist in the end times. I realize this might be a bit much for people. I've already given you warnings. All right. Unlike the mysteries around Eastern development, the role of organized crime in covertly arming the Haganah is well documented. So again, the funding of the Haganah, stockpiling weapons so that Israel would be able to start fighting for its independence illegally before they declared independence, that was allegedly done with the help of organized crime. Now, again, I'm not going to lay down all the foundations. If you want to read that deeper in the book, buy a copy of One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb and read the details yourself if you really need to know the names and all the documents and the footnotes at the end that cite where the sources came from. That's beyond the scope of this book. We're just looking for high-level stuff. As these unofficial arms trade networks spread across the US, gangsters and mobsters, many of whom actively identified with the Zionist cause, threw their hats into the ring. So the Zionist cause, the establishment of Israel as a nation, gangsters, mobsters who were Israeli gangsters, mobsters, American gangsters, mobsters, all who believe that the Zionism has to be a thing, that Israel has to be established again as a nation in end times, that they started to support that. Early on, Arazi, or I probably pronouncing his name, Arazi, probably pronounced wrong, forged ties with Meyer Lansky, requesting aid in maritime transfer of arms. Lansky, in turn, contacted two of his associates who controlled the New York City's docks and longshoremen's union, Albert Anastasia and Joe Adonis. The trio then helped Israeli agents conceal the arms purchased for Israel. So they're secretly buying arms headed for Israel, while arms bound for Egypt mysteriously fell overboard. So they're saying we're shipping it out of New York to Egypt, and then the arms suddenly get lost at sea, and then end up mysteriously somehow in hidden underground Israeli uprising things, so that when it comes time to fight for their independence, they're well stocked. And that's kind of how the mob and Israel started to work together. And the U.S., as Israeli interests in circles, believed that Israel had to fight for its independence and be established. Lansky's close associate, Bugsy Siegel, that's a name that you might know from mobster lore, met with Reuven Daphne, a representative of the Haganah looking to raise funds. Daphne, as the story goes, told Siegel that the Zionists were looking to unshackle themselves from British rule, and that the path to do so was to fight. Siegel told Daphne, "I'm with you," and for several weeks afterwards, the Haganah would receive suitcases filled with $5 and $10 bills, 50,000 in all. Besides Lansky, one of the more active mobsters in the flow of arms was Joseph Beoni Joe Zaccarelli. According to files obtained from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Zaccarelli was alleged to have been involved in the traffic of arms and munitions sold to the government of Israel. And again, all I'm trying to point out is that the big picture, the mob, and Israeli mob and American mobsters are in bed selling and stockpiling Israel secretly underground and hiding shipments of stuff that gets lost at sea to underground support the rise of Israel as a nation, illegally, clandestinely, and with the help of the mob. So that's what that's the big picture, is that can you separate the mob from government actions involving Israel and the United States? Zaccarelli was close to Carmine Galante, a key player in the Bonanno Mafia family, and would later become one of Roy Cohn's main clients from the criminal underworld. Again, a lot of names. Don't worry about all of it. At one point in the 1950s, Zaccarelli was dispatched to Montreal by Galante to work with the Canadian mobster Zancanzo Catroni. Together, Zaccarelli and Catroni organized the import of large sums of heroin into the country as part of the Canadian wing of the French Connection. There's so much there, and so many things, and a lot of allegations flying left and right without support, without whatever. So I'm just not going to spend a lot of time on it, other than to say that this author believes that there's a lot of connections between organized crime and drugs and illegal arms involving the U.S. and Israeli people trying to establish Israel as a nation. Zaccarelli was also alleged to be a close business associate with Louis Rosenstiel, Rosenstiel's fourth wife, Susan Kaufman, who we read about in earlier chapters and talked about in earlier chapters, testified that Zaccarelli had been a secret partner in New Jersey warehouses owned by Schenley Industries, Rosenstiel's company. She further alleged that Rosenstiel had meetings with Zaccarelli and Mayor Lansky. The connection to Schenley signals Zaccarelli's penchant for involving himself in quasi-legitimate businesses that acted as both above-board profit turners and as fronts for less than reputable activities. It's a lot, but it's mob relations, ties to mobsters and governments, and it's all convoluted. And yeah, I get it. Adolf Al Schwimmer was the founder of the Israeli Aircraft Industries, one of the country's great military contractors, known today as Israel Aerospace Industries, or IAI. During the 1930s, he worked for Lockheed Martin, right, and TWA, and after World War II broke out, he was affiliated in some capacity with the U.S. Air Transport Command. Schwimmer would remain active down through the decades, with a tendency to crop up in various Cold War-era covert operations. Perhaps most notoriously, he emerged as a key player in the Israeli side of the Iran-Contra affair, and by some accounts was the individual who conceived of the arms for hostages plot that was at the center of Ollie North's, or Oliver North's, complicated web. And yeah, the Ollie North Iran-Contra affair is a major part of U.S. history and super convoluted, and most Americans check out, which is why this shit continues to happen, because people don't want to think that hard. They're like, shit, football's on, man. I don't really want to know about how they negotiated a deal and how the Israelis were helping out and how we were illegally funding stuff and how the CIA is smuggling drugs into the country. Football is on. That's what I care about. So I get it. And I'm not even trying to bust your balls too much. I get it. I don't want to have to memorize all this shit. All you need to know is get to the point where you're like, man, maybe we do a lot of sketchy shit in the world. Maybe we do a lot of sketchy shit. And maybe those sketchy shit things have receipts later on and people get killed when they don't play ball. That's where we're leading with all of this. In his work securing materials for the Haganah, Schwimmer worked closely with Irvin Swifty Schindler. And Schindler owned an air freight company called Service Air, which Schwimmer relocated to California with funds from the Haganah. Together, Schwimmer and Schindler utilized the company as a means for acquiring aircraft and aircraft parts to be shipped to Palestine. Yet, with an embargo in place due to President Truman's declaration of neutrality, so we're going to stay out of that whole Israel-Palestine shit. We're going to stay out of it. So because that's in place, and the president's saying we're going to stay out of that whole shit, we're not getting involved in the Israeli-Palestine situation and the establishment of that and fight of all that. We're not doing it. So American businessmen do this trick. They take Service Air. So Service Air was prohibited from sending them overseas, but Schwimmer and Schindler, aided by Arazi, turned to the Haganah's contacts in Panama. Soon, legal ownership of airplanes was transferred to the newly established Panamanian National Airline, or LAPSA, allowing the aircraft to be legally flown to Panama. From there, they would be moved abroad to Israel. So, hey, you can't work with Israel. Okay, we'll work with Panama, and then Panama will ship them to Israel. We'll get it there anyways, and we'll make some money off of it. In Chapter 7, which details the Iran-Contra affair, Israel's close-knit relationship with Panama is mentioned in greater detail. And I don't blame you if you don't want to know it that much. Some people are going to like this series, and some people are going to like, frick, DA, let's just talk about Idaho 4 or something like that, because it's got a lot less to deal with, and I get it. Politics and religion, whoo! They tell you not to talk about that shit. I shouldn't be talking about that shit, but I can't help myself. So here we're going to go. One particularly important anti-communist force that was collaborating with the Haganah was Somoza regime in Nicaragua. The special relationship between the Zionist cause, again, that Zionist cause is those who want to establish Israel as a nation again, and largely because of religious beliefs, and Somoza's Nicaragua were largely due to the heavy presence of United Fruit, the New York-Boston banana trading company, whose influence in Latin America was to be fundamentally intertwined with the CIA's activities in the region. OMFG. I understand. It's convoluted. Oh, now the CIA is involved in smuggling or selling bananas, and that somehow leads to Iran-Contra affair in Latin America. I'm out. Football's on. And I don't blame you. But I'm going to try my best to make this entertaining and a little bit educational as you just try to get the high-level, low-hanging fruit, no pun intended on the banana thing. All right. In 1933, United Fruit had fallen under the control of Samuel Zamori, whose Kyomale Fruit Company, a favorite of top Wall Street firms like Lehman and Goldman Sachs, had merged with the company several years prior. Zamori, during the 1940s, was a big backer of Zionist causes. Again, the establishment of Israel. He aided the supply of arms to the Haganah and reportedly helped the organization acquire the SS Exodus, a steamship used to ferry refugees to Palestine in 1946. United Fruit, which later became United Brands, is discussed throughout this book due to its persistent intelligence agency connections, as well as the fact that its main leadership later included members of Leslie Wexner. I told you, always pay attention to Wexner and Bronfman as we move forward to Jeffrey Epstein. So let me start this over again. United Brands is discussed throughout this book due to its persistent intelligence connections, as well as the fact of its main leadership, including members of Leslie Wexner's inner circle and his two main mentors, Max Fisher and A. Alfred Tubman. In 1946, a Truman's embargo began to be enforced. Nicaragua started providing arms to the Haganah. Somoza reportedly profited directly from this venture. He received 3.5% commission on all arms purchased and made by the Haganah under the Nicaraguan aegis. A decade later, Israel returned the favor when Shimon Peres negotiated an arms deal with Somoza that transferred Israel's eminent military industrial complex into the primary supplier of weapons for Nicaragua. So I scratch your back selling arms to you when you need it, and then you scratch my back and you sell arms back to me when I need it. We'll supply each other in our wars across the world, and everybody will profit who's into selling arms, whether it's legal or not legal. And I realize most people don't give a shit. You've checked out a long time ago. For the few of you who are left, man, leave a note letting me know that at 40 minutes in, you're still with me. Anyways, as will be discussed in Chapter 7, Israel was active in arming and training the Nicaragua Contras, the U.S.-backed paramilitary forces that opposed the Sandinista government, which had toppled the Somoza regime in the late 1970s. There's a lot there. There's a whole chapter of it coming up. Whether you read through it or want to hear about it, I don't know, but we're going to do it anyways because it's in the book, and I plan on sticking with this. The entry of Israel into this conflict was guaranteed by this precise history and the Reagan administration. Remember, we talked about Reagan and mobsters bringing up Reagan into the office saying, hey, we got this guy in the music industry and the acting industry. We're going to put him in the president of the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and we're going to make him governor of California, and that's our roadhouse to the White House, and we're going to make sure we get somebody who's owned by the mob in the White House. That's the story allegedly told in an earlier chapter. Read that chapter. And I think the title has something to do with Reagan. So, the entry of Israel into the conflict was guaranteed by the precise history and Reagan administration as part of its propaganda campaign. It was quick to paint the new Sandinista-led government as violently anti-Semitic. They don't like Jews. They don't like Israel. They're anti-Semitic. And that became part of what we used to use that and get people in America spun up to help our cause. We're sheeple in America. You just tell them the right things and we'll all go to war and we don't even know what we're fighting for and whose business interests we're actually supporting. It's a lot. The relationship between the Haganah and Latin America wasn't solely dependent upon the graces of Zamora and United Fruit. Reportedly, Haganah officers called upon the services of Sam Kay, a Florida businessman and real estate developer who had extensive contracts in Panama, Batista's Cuba, and elsewhere. FBI files describe Kay as a reputable international gangster, and one of the close business associates was Miami Beach hotel impresario Morris Landsberg, who was himself a frontman for Mayor Lansky. Kay would later be linked to Florida mob boss Santo Trafficante, though the two were reported to have had a falling out that would almost cost Kay his life. Big names in mobsters, again, associated with businessmen. That's the key takeaway. Don't worry about memorizing all the names. If you don't recognize his names like Trafficante, different mobsters' names that keep popping up, the idea, hopefully you do recognize the names and go, oh yeah, that's a famous mobster. And they're in bed with all the government agencies. Isn't that interesting? Where do you draw the line between government agencies, intelligence agencies, and mobsters like Trafficante? All right. It was at this point where the Zionist interest melded with organized crime's real estate ventures, casino operations, and slush funds at the door of the Caribbean. Soon, these connections would truly begin to sprawl outwards and become international in scope. And I think that is where we end for today on the discussion of the book. Now we're going to dive into that pesky, pesky little area that gets people shot. No pun intended. Like, okay, so there is a rumor that Charlie Kirk may have been assassinated in part because of Israel. And there's all kinds of convoluted stuff about why I don't understand. What does he say about Israel have anything to do with the price of tea in China? Is that the phrase? Anyways, so I'm going to try to do my best to try to explain to you as I see the religious implications and one of the big rumors out there. And I do so with a humongous grain of salt. I've already had somebody damn near kind of threaten me of being on the side of evil for allowing someone to say that Erika Kirk may have been involved with her husband's death. That statement that somebody made, that Erika Kirk Erika Kirk, but was not her maiden name, that Erika Kirk may have been involved in her husband Charlie's assassination, was something that caused somebody to accuse another person I know and myself as being on the side of evil. And that scares me in this country. When people get so spun up about asking questions that to even mention it means that you're an agent of evil. And then the irony is that you're using good versus evil and then think that somehow violence against people who are on the side of evil is appropriate. I just feel like we're missing something. It's just questions. And for the best I can do, I hope I don't get shot. I hope I don't get murdered, because I'm simply going to say, here is where I think some of the allegations are, that Erika could have been somehow involved in her husband's assassination. I am not saying Erika is involved in her husband's assassination. Please understand that. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is, this is my best breakdown of why some people say that could have happened, as I think they're trying to imply. It's my guess. I could be wrong, but it's my guess from what I know about history, what I know about the Bible, what I know about Israel and the Zionist movement. Here's how the logic goes. In summary, it's this. We're going to go red, yellow, green, like a stoplight. So I'm going to read red. I'm going to scroll back up to yellow, and we're going to read through green to finish. And there's a lot of stuff we're going to read. The history is this. Charlie Kirk, this is the summary. Charlie Kirk was an evangelical Christian from long ago. Only recently, in recent years, somewhere around the 2021 timeframe, he married, right, Erika, who her last name is somewhere in this thing. We'll get it. I can't remember. It's a Fronsky or something like that. Anyways, he married Erika, and she was a Catholic. So he was a Protestant evangelical Christian. She was a Catholic. Over a short period of time in their marriage, Charlie Kirk began to change publicly some of his statements about Israel. He was very pro-Israel. He was very much on the establishment of Israel as a nation and supporting Israel as our country is supporting Israel. And when questioned at college universities about things like dispensationalism, while I watched a video where Charlie Kirk was like, I really don't want to get into a big religious discussion because that's outside the purview of our stuff. But let me say, dispensationalism is near and dear to my heart. What that means is, as an evangelical Christian, people like Charlie Kirk believed that Israel had to be established as a nation for end-time events to take place. That was something that was quote unquote near and dear to Charlie's heart as an evangelical Christian. Dispensationalism, the belief that in the end times, before Jesus returns for 1,000-year reign and all that stuff like that, Israel has to be established as a nation, and there has to be a tribulation coming, according to the book of Revelations. That's something I would argue that Charlie Kirk believed in and said. It is that dispensationalism idea is near and dear to my heart. And as it would be as an evangelical Christian, that's the argument. Erika Kirk, however, was a Catholic and not so into the dispensationalism thing. Towards the end of his life, he was starting to make statements that he was this close to converting to Catholicism, that he was changing his views, and he softened his support for Israel and said, you know what, maybe we should rethink how much we support Israel. Some have argued that got him killed. Some have even gone as far as to say Donald Trump literally introduced Erika to Charlie to get him to move away from his position of pro-Israel. That's where it gets a little crazy. That's where somebody says, oh my God, if you even suggest that Erika had anything to do with her husband's death, you are evil. You're on the side of evil, waging war against God or something. No, I'm trying to point out what people are saying. This is why people say it. So follow the logic, and we're going to look through the quote unquote receipts as best that I can present them for the last 10, 15 minutes of this video. Charlie Kirk was an evangelical Christian, pro-Israel, pro-establishment of Israel as a nation, because of his religious belief, Israel needed to be a nation and have to exist to fulfill end-time prophecies. That's why he was big in supporting Israel and whatever. Then Erika gets married to him, and he starts to soften his position. He starts thinking about converting to Catholicism. This is documented. Donald Trump did indeed have ties to Erika, whether or not he knew her directly or not, and whether or not he introduced, as some people say, that Trump literally introduced Erika to Charlie. That is a rumor, that is speculation, and it's not verified by ChatGPT. Don't bust my nuts about ChatGPT. We're just going to use it as a tool today to get some talking points and some history. If you can fill in the details more and you want to, and you're brave enough to talk about it and not worry about getting shot by somebody who thinks you're evil for even mentioning it, then please fill us in the comments. I'm just going to give you the high-level overview as I see it. It's complex, but it leads to that question. Did Charlie Kirk get himself killed because of his change of position on Israel, where he was very pro-Israel and had started to soften and change his position, was asking to expose some of America's ties with Israelis through the Jeffrey Epstein files? I've said that before, that I think his pushing of that, releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files in part got him killed. And I understand, I'm not making it super clear to you how I'm making that connection. I'm just saying I think Jeffrey Epstein is related to Jeffrey Epstein is related to Charlie Kirk's assassination. I used to transpose those two names. I'm doing pretty good. All right, let's start with some receipts on this narrative. I am not saying this is what happened. I'm saying I'm trying to explain to you why people say this as best I can. In fact, I'm trying to explain to you why people say it better than they can, because most people will say, oh, I think Israel was behind it, and they don't even know why they're saying it. This is the why they would be saying it, in my opinion. Charlie Kirk co-founded Turning Point USA in 2012. The founding date is listed as June 5th, 2012. The story goes that in May 2012, when Kirk was only 18 years old, he gave a speech at Benedictine University on Youth Government Day, where he met Bill Montgomery, and Montgomery encouraged him to postpone college and devote himself to activism. A month later, June 2012, they formally launched the organization Turning Point USA. The big thing that Charlie Kirk went around on campuses, Turning Point USA, trying to talk about, preach, whatever you want to call it, his ideological beliefs. Okay? Then let's go up to yellow. I think this is the start of the yellow. Charlie Kirk was not Catholic, at least not publicly. He was broadly identified as an evangelical Protestant. That said, in recent years, he publicly expressed an openness towards Catholicism and an admiration for some Catholic traditions. He attended Mass with his wife, who was Catholic, on some occasions, though he reportedly did not take communion. Just before his death, he reportedly told a bishop that he was this close to converting to Catholicism. This is why some people believe that his change, his marrying his wife who's Catholic, and then her persuading him to become more and more Catholic and becoming this close to leaving Protestant evangelical Christianity and becoming more Catholic and less Protestant, less evangelical Protestant, could have led to him softening his position on Israel, therefore maybe turning his back on Israel, and could have got him killed by Israel, who was like, hey, we had a great guy pushing for support of Israel, and now he's turning his back on us. And some think that got him killed. Some then take the idea a little further and say, well, when did the change happen? How did he change his position on Israel? Oh, well, it changed when he married a Catholic, and his wife told him, hey, let's change our beliefs, our religion to Catholicism, and then he softened his position. And then some take that a step further to say, was she a plant to make Charlie Kirk turn on Israel? See where that's going? That's where I think some people are coming up with the foundational support to the idea that Erika herself could have been involved in her husband's death. I am not saying that. I'm trying to educate you on what I see as the logic hole that some people are going down, and probably better explained than they themselves could explain it. And that's not being arrogant on my part. I'm just saying, I bet you a lot of people who are saying, oh, I bet you it's Israel, don't even know what the underpinnings of why they're saying that, or why they're bringing up that Trump introduced Erika to Charlie Kirk, which is not proven, according to ChatGPT. We're going to get to those receipts as we finish this episode. So based on public available sources, Erika, who was Franz V, was her, I don't know how to pronounce it. Franz V was her maiden name, was raised Catholic. She attended private Catholic school, high school, and she went to Catholic communities and held vigils and prayers for Catholic communities held vigils and prayers for the Kirk family. And some reports say that she was baptized Catholic. Some sources refer to her as a practicing Catholic. And again, Charlie Kirk indicated that he was this close to converting to Catholicism. So as we got through the yellow, which is that, yes, indeed, his wife is Catholic. Yes, he indeed was Protestant, and they married. When did they marry? Let's get into that now in the green. Okay, so I thought I started that down here when they actually met. Did we cover that already? We should have covered when they met. Did I miss it somehow? Oh, here it is. Yeah. Charlie Kirk and Erika got married in 2021, very recently. According to multiple sources, they first met around 2018. In interviews and recounting their meetings, as described as happening in New York City at a Turning Point USA event, where they had a very long dinner and during which they connected deeply over theology, philosophy, and politics. So the story goes, they met in 2018, they got married in 2021. In New York City is where they met at a Turning Point thing, and they had a deep connection. And shortly after they got married, they became engaged in 2020, married in 2021. So again, this is very recent history, just a few years that they've been together. And during that few years, Charlie began to change his opinions about Israel and soften a little bit, according to the allegations. All right, so the question becomes, did Donald Trump, one of the questions becomes, and we're going to get back here, one of the questions is, did Donald Trump introduce the two of them together? That was what I just asked ChatGPT flat out. Is it true Donald Trump introduced them together? Well, there isn't any credible evidence that Donald Trump personally introduced Erika Franz V to Charlie Kirk. But here's what I found, right? Some speculative media and commentary pieces suggest theories of such a connection. For example, one article notes that knowing Erika through Miss USA and having ties to Charlie's family through Robert's work may have introduced them intentionally or not. Donald Trump was involved with Miss USA pageants. Erika was a runner-up, if you will, in the Miss USA pageant during the time that Donald Trump was in ownership of that organization. So some have alleged literally Donald Trump introduced Erika to Charlie, maybe some say for the purpose of changing his views on Israel. I don't know. That's what some people are I think they're hinting at. There is support for the idea that Donald Trump was involved in the Miss USA pageant. So is it true that Donald Trump owned or was involved in Miss USA pageant during the time when Erika was competing? Yes. And so here's what it says. Confirmed. Donald Trump, through his business interests, owned or co-owned Miss Universe organization, which includes Miss USA from 1996 until 2015. So during the time that she was allegedly in this. During the time that Erika competed, she represented Arizona in the Miss USA 2012 pageant and was under the ownership umbrella that Donald Trump owned. Thus, when Erika competed in 2012, she was participating in a pageant that was institutionally under the Trump-owned pageant organization. Does it prove anything that Trump literally set up Erika with Charlie? No. What it says is Trump should have, could have, may have known Erika because he was involved in the pageant industry, owning that organization when she was up and coming. Did he meet her? Did he know her? Was there anything facilitated? Apparently nothing that ChatGPT wants to talk about, and maybe nothing at all, but just pointing it out, that's what some people are saying. That's what the rumors are on. Did you know that Donald Trump himself introduced the two of them? I don't know. ChatGPT doesn't want to go that far. But then again, some would argue ChatGPT is programmed to only tell us what the way they want us to know. So anyways, there is no clear, this is ChatGPT, there is no clear reliable evidence that Donald Trump personally introduced Erika Fronsvie to Charlie Kirk or that Trump played a direct matchmaking role. There is also no solid public record showing that Trump had direct personal relationships with Erika during her pageant days, beyond the fact that she competed in a pageant that he owned. Some speculative commentary and media suggest theories of connections, e.g., for example, that Trump might have known her through the pageant world, but these are not corroborated by mainstream or authoritative sources. Well, first of all, mainstream media wouldn't tell you that because they have interests to say, shut the hell up about that kind of shit. No mainstream media is going to tell you about that in the first place. So yeah, mainstream media hasn't confirmed it. Why would they? That's me saying that. But anyways. So then it continues. Was Charlie changing his views? This is the key that we're going to end with. Was Charlie changing his views on Israel right before his death? Yes. There is reporting that in the months prior to his death, Charlie Kirk appeared to be rethinking or moderating certain aspects of his views on Israel. What's unclear is how far that shift went, how permanent it was, or how much of a public posturing versus deep conviction it was. So here's the breakdown of the evidence, what the evidence says, and the indications of change. Criticism of U.S. aid and questioning the special relationship. So again, U.S. has special relationship with Israel, has always been on its side, always providing aid, and Charlie has become just recently, after with his wife and becoming nearly close to converting to Catholicism, suddenly is questioning just how much we should be supporting Israel. That's the story. That's the narrative. One article claims that Kirk raised the possibility of cutting off off U.S. aid to Israel. So he's pushing. One article claims Kirk was entertaining the idea that the United States should cut off aid to Israel. Did that get him killed? Saying that maybe young people would think higher of Israel or at least stop talking about it so much if that were done. This suggests that he was considering putting constraints or conditions on the U.S.-Israeli relationship rather than unqualified support. So what does that mean? There are some who believe that Charlie Kirk was on the fast pace to becoming the next U.S. president. He could have been president in 4 to 8 years. If he is not 100% gung-ho pro-Israel and is going to change America's stance of pretty much being 100% pro-Israel, and he's going to become a future president, not pro-Israel, did somebody decide to take him out early? Because Israeli forces, or even Protestants who want Israel to be a thing for the fulfillment of end-time prophecies, are they going to allow a president to come in there changing their opinions about whether the U.S. should support Israel? That's maybe the underpinning of why people are freaking out about the Israeli connection. Pressure and falling out of love and a potential intervention. Some reports, especially from conservative media, allege that Kirk was on the brink of changing some of his positions about Gaza's war, and that influential figures tried to pressure him to stay pro-Israel. He's turning against Israel, that's the allegation, and he's getting pressure. Stay pro-Israel. And he's not. He's shifting. He's changing he's thinking about becoming Catholic. He's changing him. Maybe he's softening his views on dispensationalism. He's rethinking United States support of Israel. And people are like, you better stay pro-Israel. So, one report claims that he was offered a ton of money to remain aligned with the hardline stance. Pro-Israel all the way, we will pay you. Israel will pay you big money to stay pro-Israel. You're the next future president of the United States, the argument would be. You're the next future president of the United States. You cannot turn on Israel. We'll pay you big money to stay pro-Israel. Do not shift your position like it looks like you're doing. I won't take that money, is what people say Charlie Kirk said. And then right after that, he's killed. Is it a coincidence? I'm just asking questions. Even amid these speculations, Kirk continued to publicly affirm strong support for Israel. So even though it's been put out in the public that he was softening his view on Israel, he still publicly maintains some strong support in other things, like this statement, according to Charlie Kirk. I believe in the scriptural land rights given to Israel. I want them to win. I have a bulletproof resume showing my defense of Israel. So Charlie's leaning back on his previous statements. You know, for decades, I've been talking about Israel. I'm in support of Israel. I've got a bulletproof history of support of Israel. What he's downplaying perhaps is that he's shifting that stance and saying, maybe we don't need to be balls deep in Israel. Maybe we should backpedal a little bit, soften our thing a little bit. But when pressed, hey, I'm still pro-Israel. Look at my history. I've always talked pro-Israel. But was that changing? So while they have been while he may have been exploring nuances or pushing back on some aspects of U.S. policy towards Israel, he did not abandon or repudiate the core affinity. More publicly critical of government overreach, free speech, and anti-BDS law. So, according to his biography entries, Kirk opposed a bipartisan bill, so Republicans and Democrats, to expand anti-BDS or boycott, divest sanctions legislation, arguing that it would only create more anti-Semitism and fuel narratives that Israel is controlling U.S. policy. Controlling U.S. policy. So Kirk is making statements and that, hey, people are arguing that Israel controls U.S. policy. Yeah, that's what the entire book, I feel like, I haven't read the entire book, One Nation Under Blackmail is talking about. Is Israel controlling U.S. policy? And is Trump pushing back, or was Charlie pushing back on that? The stance suggests that he was becoming more wary of legislative strict alignment, meaning strict aligned with Israel, or limiting space for dissent regarding Israeli policy. So he was allowing us to back off a little bit on our stronghold support of Israel and allowing some questions to be asked about Israel. Did that get him killed? Social media and internal forums. Some commentators also point out that in a private or semi-private forum, he was musing about tempering unconditional support, or at least inserting qualifications. So again, Charlie Kirk, according to social media, was starting to show signs of not being 100% pro-Israel and starting to have qualifications. Well, yeah, we should support Israel, but maybe not to the extent that we are. And did that get him killed? So we don't have a clear, fully documented public statement in which Kirk has said, I've changed my view on Israel. It is ambiguous whether his shifts were strategic, for example, to appeal to younger conservatives who are more critical of Israel's policy, or a genuine change in his conviction. To the extent of his changes, whether they would have been minor tweaks or major tweaks is uncertain. Based on the evidence, it seems likely that Kirk was exploring a more nuanced position on Israel right before his death, rather than blind blanket support that he may have been weighing. Whether U.S. support should have guardrails, how much the U.S. should be involved in Israeli military conflicts, and whether pro-Israel support should be unconditional in every circumstance. However, the core of his pro-Israel identity and his theology still remained intact publicly. He continued to speak of Israel's scriptural land rights and of prophecy. So at the end of the day, when I led with that thing that you're going to think was clickbait, devil's advocates, you started this out with clickbait. This has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with Christianity. You just clickbaited us. I just ended after talking about some of the foundational aspects of Israel's or sorry, of America's pro-Israel Zionist support to establish the nation of Israel again, and doing it through backdoor deals, selling of arms, underground mobster ties, doing things illegally to fund the uprising of Israel as a nation, which we've done from day one of the establishment of Israel. Are we still in bed with Israel? Are certain elements of the Israeli government wanting the United States to never change its opinion, to being 100% pro-Israel, supporting them every step of the way? Was Charlie Kirk changing his view on that? Did that have anything to do with his wife softening his position to become more Catholic and this close to converted to Catholicism? Not what I am claiming happened, but I'm saying is you best ask the question, because that's in the narrative. And if you followed any of the logic on this, you are way more informed than your typical armchair person who, when they say things about Israel, has no idea what they're even talking about, in my opinion. Have a great day. The devil is in the details. No pun intended. This isn't about the devil. I'm not evil. Let it go. Talk to you later. Bye.